think it's time.
Time for what, honey?
Time to start talking to Ricky about the police.
The Talk, 15-minute film from the United States. It's basically like 90% of the film after the kind of very effective first part is an ideological conversation between a married couple who obviously have both right and wrong things to say. So it's an interesting conversation because it's obviously an important conversation, and it's a deep one as well. Kind of very interesting film. Just two married couple talking in the kitchen about a very serious subject. And of course, in the 21st century, we live in 2019, we still have to have this conversation.
It's pretty interesting because I've actually experienced that, but in the 70s, when I was in this country. I first came to this country. And it's kind of interesting that it all has to do with context, because I have, actually on my blog, I do write experiences that I've had with police since the 60s until now. And what I see going on in the States, I'm glad I'm not there, but the interesting thing is, and when I say context, in that there's a context for the 60s, the 70s, 80s, and so on. And the way things have changed over the years, I don't think I'd be, let's put it this way, I have been stopped by the police in a neighborhood where I guess you could say I was the only black person that was actually living there, and it was through marriage. And the police did ask those questions, but not in the tone and in the manner that those guys did. And they did ask what I was carrying in my bag, which I showed them. Interestingly enough, I was coming home from martial arts training, and I stopped off at a friend's place, and they saw my belt and et cetera, et cetera. So it was, and back then also in the 70s, in the area the cops were all white, and I was just going through at night at 2 o'clock in the morning because I also work nights. So seeing this and then extrapolating to when I went through my issues and through to this day, but at the same time, I think I had the benefit of coming from Jamaica. My family were police officers, so I had a different manner of dealing with them, with an attitude that wasn't defensive, and as that fellow that was shown on the screen, he was not confrontational, but the dynamics of the era sets up, no matter what you say, you're going to be seen as threatening. And so those are concerns that I have for my relations that are babies that are growing up, and I see them coming through the same thing.
It's always tough to have a decent, mature talk with the kids, and it's a bold one. And I think the talk shouldn't just be to the kids of the color, but also to the kids of the non-color as well, because there's proper bridging, so that because they are the majority over here. So even they need to understand there are such people, and you should be inclusive for them as well.
What happens to these cops that commit these crimes? Nothing. 9 times out of 10, they're acquitted.
But I mean, it is true that, of course, there is police brutality that's happening to people of all races and genders. I feel very passionate about police brutality because I think it's pretty messed up. I think that it's pretty messed up that the police even has the option to shoot you, even if you're not armed. I feel like it's pretty messed up.
I thought the film did a great job of touching on the complexity of the issue, because the couple was dealing with being parents and the innocence that might be lost, dealing with their own perceptions of safety because they live in a good neighborhood, and this might not, they worked so hard to insulate their family from that. The idea that they both actually seem to have gone through similar instances, but thought maybe times have changed, and facing that reality. it is true that white people get killed by police, but the motivations tend to be very different. And I think what we've seen in the recent past and current events is that people are being forced into states of mind. And like, I've known people within my circle that have had to have that conversation with their kids, and that's kind of, you know, you warn your kids not to talk to strangers. You shouldn't have to warn your kids to not have your hands in your pockets when you talk to police, or make sure you put your hood down, and make sure you don't make sudden movements. And there's even programs now where people are having to get first aid training because there's a likelihood that they could get shot.
You're teaching, like, so my daughter who's going to kindergarten, you're teaching them to, like, cops are good people, like, who do you trust on the street, like the firemen, the cops, and then, so those are the people you trust. So having that conversation 4 years later is ass backwards. And people like this couple who are obviously well-to-do, they pay a lot of taxes, and they're doing well according to society standards. And it's ass backwards that they have to worry about themselves. That's sort of what the moral of this film is. It's very, there is a lot of interesting, it's basically, and it's like I said, very well performed, very effective opening, and it's a very interesting film.